It looks like ribs, it isn't ribs. People treat it like it's priceless. And yet, McDonald's tends to time its return for when it benefits their business most. That timing has less to do with whim and more to do with a blend of marketing strategy and supply chain math. From some franchise owners who welcome the traffic to others who warn of the headaches it brings, and from food creators who amplify every release online, the McRib has become less about the sandwich itself and more about the story around it. That story raises a bigger question. Why do people still treat this limited sandwich like a rare find, even in 2025? The cult of the McRib in 2025. In 2025, one of the strangest sights in food culture is watching a mass-produced fast food sandwich attract the kind of devotion usually reserved for limited sneakers or vinyl reissues. The McRib, essentially a restructured pork shoulder patty dressed up with barbecue sauce, has been around for decades, and yet its following has only become louder and more visible. What makes it stand out now is not just older fans from the 80s and 90s, but entire waves of people who weren't even alive when it debuted. For them, its arrival has turned into a marker on the calendar, almost like a cultural holiday. Each release leaves a visible footprint online. Scroll TikTok and you'll see slow-motion sauce drips, cinematic unwrapping staged as if someone were revealing a luxury item, or skits of mock heartbreak when the sandwich vanishes again. Videos of McRib stored in acrylic display cases or even exaggerated funerals, when local availability ends rack up millions of views. These jokes keep the sandwich alive in the collective imagination, even for people who never actually order it. The culture has evolved past eating. It's become a participatory performance that restarts whenever the McRib returns. This collective joke works because it rests on a contradiction. At its core, the McRib is not rare, exotic, or expensive. It's a low-cost fast food product available at chain locations across the country. And yet when the chance to get one comes around, it gets treated like it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Fans will drive to neighboring cities or track sightings online through tools like the unofficial McRib locator, behaving as though it were a collector's item. By exaggerating scarcity, the myth strengthens itself. Even those who don't eat it end up participating through memes because they don't want to miss the communal moment. That mindset helps explain why McRib fandom hasn't faded even as younger generations dominate the platforms where food culture gets performed. For Gen Z and younger millennials, the experience is less about taste and more about enrolling in a shared spectacle. Buying and posting about the sandwich is equivalent to adding your stamp to that cycle of jokes, parodies, and rituals. The criticism of flavor or texture isn't ignored, it's folded into the ritual. Fans themselves often acknowledge the sandwich doesn't live up to the hype, but the fact that such an ordinary item inspires extraordinary devotion is exactly what keeps people playing along. Recent rollouts show this cycle is still strong. At the end of 2024, McDonald's brought the McRib back nationwide alongside a new promotional sauce, and headlines confirmed how quickly social media ran with the news. Each announcement made people rush to confirm sightings, film reactions, or find ways to exaggerate the moment. That national run set the stage for 2025, reinforcing that the McRib isn't just a menu item, but an annual storyline woven into the rhythm of fast food culture. This is what makes the so-called cult of the McRib feel less like nostalgia and more like performance. What you hold in your hands isn't treated as a simple sandwich. It becomes a prop in a larger play about scarcity, devotion, and the absurdity of treating cheap food like gold. Nobody stages elaborate jokes about a Big Mac because it's always there. The McRib generates content precisely because it comes and goes. Its vanishing is the spark that sustains the cycle. Every disappearance generates longing, and every sudden return restarts the ritual, keeping it ancient in form but constantly refreshed by new platforms and voices. That constant rhythm leaves one lingering puzzle. With all this energy surrounding it, why does McDonald's just keep the McRib on the menu year-round? Fans have been asking that question for decades, and in 2025, the answer still isn't straightforward. Artificial scarcity or brilliant chaos? Artificial scarcity or brilliant chaos? That's the question at the heart of every McRib comeback. On the surface, it might look like simple marketing theater, but the reasons behind its stop-and-start availability are more layered. Over the years, observers have pointed to three main explanations. The sandwich helps McDonald's manage supply and costs. It thrives on manufactured scarcity, and it may even act as a way to take advantage of pork price swings. Each of these theories tells part of the story. The first theory is about inventory and cost. Menu items like fries or Big Macs rely on stable ingredients with predictable supply. The McRib, made from restructured pork shoulder, depends on a bulk protein that fluctuates far more in cost. If it were permanent, franchises would face unpredictable margins every time pork prices spiked. Treating it as a special event solves that problem. When it comes back only for a short run, McDonald's can buy ingredients in bulk for a limited window, promote it heavily, and avoid the headaches of sustaining it year-round. Some franchise owners have even described mixed feelings about the product, welcoming the traffic it brings but worrying about prep space and costs. This tension helps explain why the company hasn't locked it into the permanent menu, even if it generates predictable excitement when available. The second theory is about marketing scarcity. Here, the McRib behaves more like a sneaker drop than a sandwich. Fans treat each return as a brief window of opportunity, rushing in before it vanishes again. The key difference is unpredictability. Consider the Shamrock Shake. It reappears every March like clockwork. Everyone knows when it's coming, and while it draws attention, it doesn't feel urgent. McRib, by contrast, slips in at different times, some years in October, others closer to Thanksgiving, and occasionally not at all. That unpredictability makes the announcement feel like surprise news rather than a routine seasonal release. The effect is drama. Customers experience each return as something they can miss if they don't act quickly. Complaints and jokes online feed the cycle, as people post about frustration only to amplify demand for the next release. The third theory has less to do with marketing style and more to do with commodity logic. Analysts have observed that the McRib often reappears when pork prices dip on the open market. Since its patty is formed from pork trimmings, running the sandwich during these low-price stretches reduces costs and turns a reliable profit. To put it simply, when pork is cheap, the McRib is affordable for McDonald's to sell. When pork is expensive, it quietly disappears. This possibility is what some describe as pork price arbitrage, capitalizing on fluctuations in a commodity market by treating the sandwich as a flexible on-and-off product. McDonald's doesn't present it this way, of course. Publicly, its reappearance is framed as a cultural moment or even a nostalgic tradition. Revealing a cost-driven motive would disrupt that narrative, so the brand emphasizes story over strategy. These three perspectives, inventory management, marketing scarcity, and pork price arbitrage, aren't mutually exclusive. Instead, they seem to intersect and reinforce one another. A limited-time run contains franchise costs while also creating excitement and often aligns with favorable pork markets. The McRib becomes a tool for managing logistics and economy, packaged as a cultural event. The sandwich's value comes less from its recipe and more from how it is staged, timed, and withdrawn. The strategy has consequences. Scarcity encourages people to treat the McRib as more than food. Each return becomes memorable because it interrupts normal expectations. Customers can recall specific years when they ate one, or specific locations where they finally found it. That personal detail makes the sandwich feel like part of a wider cultural timeline. In contrast, permanent menu items never gain such emotional weight. Their ubiquity makes them invisible. Scarcity turns the McRib into a conversation piece, while permanence would dissolve it into everyday sameness. At the same time, the chaos of its timing creates a love-hate relationship. Fans long for easier predictability, but the unpredictability keeps them invested. By never settling into a neat annual cycle, the sandwich preserves its aura of mystery. Customers may mock the randomness or complain about disappointment, but those very responses amplify attention. Posts lamenting its departure spread almost as widely as celebratory posts about its return. This cycle of joy, loss, and speculation keeps the item alive in culture even during its absence. In that sense, frustration isn't a flaw of the strategy, it's part of how it works. The result is a sandwich that continues to be treated like an event, even though its core ingredients are inexpensive, and its flavor is often described as average. Regular menu items may outsell it in volume, but none attract the same chatter. For McDonald's, controlled chaos sustains relevance. By keeping timing vague, anchoring the rollout in spectacle, and potentially riding pork price waves, the McRib maintains its reputation as both elusive and iconic. What all of this shows is that the McRib occupies a rare category in fast food culture. It isn't defined by taste alone or nostalgia alone, and it isn't even defined by its production alone. It lives at the intersection of economic calculation and deliberate unpredictability. Scarcity isn't a minor feature, it is the foundation of its survival. Still, there's one element lurking under these explanations that deserves closer attention. If unpredictability and scarcity help maintain cultural buzz, what role does raw economics play in shaping the schedule? Some observers suggest the puzzle is less about hype and more about hogs, and that pork commodities may hold the clearest clue to when and why the McRib shows up. The economics of pork and timing games. Timing often tracks what's happening in the pork market, and that detail may be more important to the McRib schedule than any mystery marketing play. The patty itself isn't a premium cut, but rather restructured pork shoulder trimmings formed into a rib-shaped mold. Because it depends on those trimmings, its costs rise and fall with the swings of the larger pork industry. Analysts and industry commentary have pointed out that several re-releases over the years tend to line up with periods when wholesale pork prices dip, suggesting the launch is as much about procurement opportunities as it is about publicity. Those price shifts are rarely random. Pork is known for volatility, far more than beef or poultry. Feed grain costs, whether patterns that affect harvests, disease outbreaks among herds, or sudden changes in foreign demand all play roles in how quickly supply chains tighten or loosen. When the market pushes supply upward, trimming prices drop, which creates a window for McDonald's to secure contracts across thousands of restaurants at a favorable margin. When the market is tight, running a nationwide promotion on pork becomes risky and expensive, so the sandwich often skips a season. Fans chalk it up to teasing or secrecy, but the economics often dictate those absences. To grasp why this matters, think about scale. McDonald's doesn't need a few tons of pork. It needs enormous quantities to supply a nationwide rollout. Industry reports estimate that even a single limited campaign can move millions of pounds of pork shoulder through the system. Suppliers get to unload cuts that may not have a natural home in retail cases, while McDonald's transforms that bulk product into a cultural event. The brand markets it as a beloved item returning for a short time, but behind the curtain, it's also a prudent way to move through a sudden surge in pork supply efficiently. This balancing act can make what looks like pure marketing magic seem more like a calculated two-step. Marketing emphasizes scarcity, nostalgia, and unpredictability. Procurement focuses on margins, supply windows, and cost control. Both effects are likely at play. The McRib serves as a cultural flashpoint on the surface and as a commodity outlet underneath. It succeeds because the spectacle and the economics reinforce each other rather than conflict. The marketing team gets a story worth amplifying, while the supply chain team secures product at a price that justifies the promotion. The underlying dynamics don't need to be overly complicated. Economists sometimes use hog cycles to describe how supply expands and contracts over multi-year stretches. When farmers react to high prices by raising larger herds, supply floods in, trimming prices fall, and buyers gain leverage. When costs of feed spike or global demand surges, as with increased imports to China, herds are downsized, supply tightens, and buyers face higher costs. McDonald's procurement division doesn't control these rhythms, but it can watch them closely. An everyday customer scrolling Instagram isn't thinking about grain yields or pork import quotas, but those distant factors often ripple directly into whether the sandwich appears in November or not at all. This perspective reframes much of the myth. Scarcity and mystery are real, but they don't always originate in advertising rooms. Sometimes they emerge from conditions McDonald's doesn't fully control yet takes advantage of. When hog markets offer supply at the right price, the McRib feels like a surprise treat. When conditions tighten, the disappearance can be quietly explained by economics rather than deliberate manipulation. The fan experience is still impactful, but the mechanics include practical calculations as much as emotional storytelling. That duality is what makes the McRib stand apart. Most limited-time fast food items serve only as marketing bursts, designed to spark interest for a few weeks before fading. The McRib relies on a more unusual equation, nostalgia and spectacle paired with an actual commodity strategy. It arrives not just because it can excite a fan base, but because the timing makes business sense. Scarcity sells, yes, but scarcity also protects margins by keeping McDonald's from committing to an item when ingredient costs are unstable. McDonald's has never publicly framed the sandwich this way, of course, because successful hedging against pork volatility doesn't make for compelling billboards. The official story leans into fun, nostalgia, and fan culture. Yet over time, outside analysts began to notice the correlation between commodity pricing and the sandwich's timing. Business reporters have even published predictions of McRib returns based not on leaks from marketing teams, but on trends in pork futures or USDA data. While correlation does not prove causation, the pattern has been strong enough to support the idea that opportunistic procurement fits comfortably alongside limited-time theatrics. And that blending of logic helps explain the longevity. The McRib has lasted not because it's the best sandwich on the menu, but because it's flexible, able to amplify demand when economics allow, and able to vanish without much backlash when economics don't. That agility makes it different from permanent offerings like burgers or fries, which carry constant obligation regardless of market trends. The McRib avoids being trapped by that responsibility. Instead, it arises when circumstances are favorable, gaining cultural weight from its rarity, while protecting the bottom line from volatility. Seen in that light, the McRib becomes a case study in how global agriculture intersects with pop culture. Scarcity, memes, and fan clubs may dominate how it's remembered, but in operational terms, it's still about aligning a high-volume, low-margin product with the right conditions. Each return expresses both logics, the one aimed at customers who crave the thrill of chasing a rare sandwich, and the one aimed at accountants ensuring those sales don't erode profit. The genius lies in blending both stories so seamlessly that consumers hardly question the mechanics. Yet those mechanics don't tell the whole story either. The economics may explain when the McRib can appear, but they don't capture the ripple effects once it does. Behind every launch, there are practical consequences for the thousands of restaurants tasked with preparing and serving it. Scarcity sparks excitement for customers, but for operators, it brings extra supply chain adjustments, kitchen training, and operational compromises. Understanding this corporate-to-consumer balance requires looking not just at cost and timing, but at how those decisions play out on the ground level. And that's where the story shifts. What looks like celebration on drive-through lines or in social media memes has a more complex side once you ask who actually carries the weight of the McRib during its limited runs. Franchise owners and secret pressure. Franchise owners sit at the center of a reality that rarely shows up in glossy ads or nostalgic fan stories. Every time the McRib returns, the logistics and costs land directly in their kitchens. Corporate might score the headlines, but it is the operators who have to deal with specialized products, limited storage, and hurried retraining of staff. The operational pain points start with the basics. The McRib bun is not a standard item. Its elongated, ridged shape requires a custom order outside the routine bread deliveries. Industry reporting confirms that franchisees must plan for separate shipments, free up scarce freezer space, and coordinate timing so the new buns don't crowd out staples. Then there is the barbecue sauce, which doesn't come in small packets, but in bulky bags that need their own storage space, rotation, and handling. Franchisees have described these requirements as burdens layered onto already tight kitchens. Add in the patties themselves, which arrive frozen and require careful allocation of space, and suddenly a store's inventory balance shifts dramatically for a few weeks. Training is another recurring task. Because many employees are seasonal or new, staff turnover means managers often reintroduce instructions from scratch every time the McRib comes back. Line workers need to learn how the sandwich is built. Managers must restructure prep stations, and everyone must adjust to the slower rhythm that comes with unfamiliar assembly. According to trade coverage in sources like Nation's Restaurant News, many operators report that this retraining cycle is a predictable headache whenever the sandwich reappears. Put together, these obstacles shape how owners view the sandwich's arrival. On paper, the McRib draws customers who might also purchase a drink, fries, or nuggets, lifting receipts. But the lift isn't universal. Smaller operators who juggle limited storage or thinner staffs often feel squeezed, struggling to explain shortages or delays to customers who assume the national campaign applies everywhere. Larger operators with more resources sometimes welcome the crowds, knowing a promotion brings traffic that offsets the hassle. Participation is technically optional in some markets, and the uneven buy-in from franchisees helps explain why local availability often appears patchy. Corporate strategy frames the McRib as a national moment, but execution is not evenly applied. Headquarters can set broad promotional calendars, launch ad campaigns, and encourage media coverage, but on the ground, local conditions determine whether the sandwich gets listed. Practical constraints like refrigeration space, supply schedules, and labor costs all play into whether a store opts in. Some owners actively lobby for the boost, hoping to capitalize on the spike. Others decline quietly, preferring to avoid complaints when shipments fall through or overtime pay spikes. In short, the rollout is a negotiation, not a strict mandate. This explains the strange geography of the McRib. A city may light up with posters and regional TV ads, while another market nearby carries nothing. In many cases, those gaps signal franchise-level decisions as much as top-down corporate planning. For operators, the sandwich functions less as an icon and more as a high-pressure bargaining chip. If a region pushes for it, they might win traffic and short-term sales. If they resist, they save their teams from disruption, but risk missing out on the goodwill of corporate or the curiosities of local customers. The item's flexibility makes it useful for McDonald's at a strategic level. Rolling it out selectively allows the company to boost struggling regions without flooding the entire system with logistical challenges. For franchisees, though, that same flexibility cuts both ways. If you're included in the promotion, it can feel like a reward or like punishment, depending on how well your infrastructure adapts. Some operators even describe the sandwich as both an opportunity and a burden, depending on the year. For customers, this behind-the-scenes split has immediate consequences. Fans often assume a national campaign means every store will carry the McRib, only to find their local outlet has opted out or run short on special buns within days. That's why industry coverage advises that buyers treat each year's promotion as regional rather than universal. To avoid disappointment, the practical route isn't planning a cross-town trip in hopes of scoring the sandwich. It's checking the McDonald's app, unofficial locator sites, or even local store socials to confirm participation before heading out. For budget-conscious viewers in particular, knowing that availability is optional can save wasted time and trips. The competing perspectives, corporate goals, operator burdens, and fan expectations combine to give the McRib its double life. It is celebrated in ad campaigns as a unifying American tradition, but internally it behaves as a management lever, a promotional bargaining token, and a logistical challenge. That dual function is what keeps it distinct. It's simultaneously a nostalgic cultural flashpoint and a sign of how much influence corporate and franchises exercise over each other. Seen from one angle, it's hype. From another, it's a negotiation table where storage space and overtime are measured against traffic spikes and goodwill. And these internal debates open up a broader question beyond McDonald's itself. If the logistical headaches are this intense, why hasn't another chain stepped in to claim its own version of the same seasonal spectacle? The industry has watched the McRib cycle for decades, and competitors have tried their own interpretations. Whether anyone has truly built their own McRib moment is a question that still hangs over the fast food world. Competitors try getting in on the act. Competitors have long studied the McRib and attempted their own versions, hoping to reproduce the same strange kind of cultural grip. Limited-time offers are now a standard playbook across the fast food industry, but the results show a clear pattern. Companies can copy the sandwich or the scarcity gimmick, yet they can't reproduce the cultural architecture that makes the McRib endure. Burger King stands as the most direct example. Industry coverage notes that the chain has launched multiple rib-style offerings, such as its BK rib sandwich, built with barbecue sauce, pickles, and buns designed to mimic McDonald's template. These promotions generated attention at the time. Customers bought them, reviewers compared them, and sales provided a short-lived boost. But once the campaign ended, so did the excitement. The products failed to return with renewed energy years later, and customers didn't develop the cycle of memes, nostalgia, and ritual that elevate the McRib beyond its recipe. Without that feedback loop, the BK rib remained a temporary novelty, remembered as a copy rather than a tradition. Other chains and retailers have experimented too. Convenience stores, regional fast food outlets, and even grocery freezer aisles have stocked their own boneless rib sandwiches. They often use the same pressed pork shoulder, molded with ridges to look like bones and drown it in sauce for effect. To a hungry customer, they serve as cheaper substitutes, but none have sparked rituals or cultural references. People might buy them, but they don't inspire TikToks, jokes, or late-night debates. Without the theater surrounding it, the product is just a sandwich. Cultural presence, the part that makes a food item feel like more than a meal, never materialized. Some competitors have attempted to sidestep ribs entirely, betting that other limited products might build similar waves. Taco Bell regularly releases unconventional mashups that bring a few weeks of buzz. Starbucks relies on its fall latte lineup to draw lines out the door. Popeyes accidentally ignited a chicken sandwich shortage in 2019, when demand surged far beyond supply. These moments captured national attention, but they follow a different pattern. They depend on novelty and first-time hype. The McRib, by contrast, builds its following on returns. Its story isn't about something new, it's about something familiar arriving only when the company decides to put it back in play. That longevity has few parallels among competitors. The timeline is what most rivals underestimate. A single rib promotion won't generate lasting memory. McDonald's has spent decades slowly conditioning its audience with absence and return. Each gap amplifies nostalgia. Each surprise relaunch resets the ritual. Competitors often run a promotion once, see numbers flat after the initial rush, and abandon it. Without a patient cycle stretching across years, the myth never forms. The lesson is straightforward. A product can be copied, but the history cannot. Scale also matters. McDonald's has the reach to negotiate pork prices across its vast supply chain, absorbing fluctuations and securing enough product to mount a nationwide release. That bargaining power lowers input costs and makes repeated rollouts financially sustainable. Smaller chains lack that leverage. They can design a copycat sandwich, but purchasing power limits their ability to repeat it consistently. Without recurring releases, the item remains a short-term experiment, unable to evolve into a cultural staple. Economics, as much as marketing, keeps the McRib out of competitors' hands. Some companies have consciously echoed McDonald's script by framing promotions as final farewells or using scarcity language. KFC has briefly experimented with vanishing menu items, and other chains have even staged mock goodbye tour for discontinued products. But imitation rarely sticks. Customers sense when a stunt lacks depth or history, and instead of leaning into nostalgia, they see it as forced. The McRib's timing quirks grew from decades of practice. Copying the outer shell, without the backstory, produces only skepticism. Taken together, these examples explain why no rival has matched the McRib's rhythm. They can roll out rib sandwiches or stage stunts, sometimes even finding strong first-week sales. But without scale, long spacing, and cultural baggage, these efforts fade quickly. McDonald's occupies a unique position. It can sell the sandwich not as an item, but as an experience, scarce, unpredictable, and anchored by decades of ritual. The competitors' products remain food alone. This divide highlights why the McRib has no true analog. It doesn't dominate because of flavor or innovation. It dominates because absence has become part of its identity, reinforced over years at a scale no other chain has replicated. Each relaunch is not just a sale opportunity, but a collective reminder of a past cycle, extended into the present. That looping rhythm creates a cultural echo others can only watch. And if timing, scale, and culture explain why rivals falter inside the United States, a larger puzzle emerges when you widen the frame. The McRib does not occupy the same elusive role everywhere. Some markets treat it as a staple, not a rare guest. That global variation adds a different layer of complexity to the story, one that reshapes what scarcity and ritual mean depending on where you stand. The global McRib puzzle. In global terms, the McRib behaves very differently than it does in the United States, and that difference has become one of the more puzzling aspects of its history. What Americans are used to treating as a scarce and unpredictable guest is, in some countries, a permanent menu item without any fanfare at all. This contrast has created what could be called the global McRib puzzle, one sandwich with entirely different roles depending on where you buy it. A clear example lies in Europe. In Germany and Luxembourg, the McRib isn't seasonal or rare. It has been available year-round for decades. Diners walk into a local McDonald's, glance at the menu, and there it is as reliably as a cheeseburger. Meanwhile, in Canada, the sandwich disappeared for years before making a reintroduction in 2024 and into 2025, covered by Canadian press as a notable comeback. Neither situation matches the US scarcity cycle, and the comparison helps explain just how deliberate McDonald's strategy is. For Americans who discover this reality online, the reaction is often disbelief. Travelers post clips of themselves in European restaurants, casually ordering McRibs in the middle of summer. Those images spread quickly through social media, becoming a running point of fascination for fans back in the US who treat every limited drop as an event. Comment sections fill with jokes about buying plane tickets just for a sandwich, as if a permanent McRib abroad represents access to a secret world where scarcity doesn't apply. But in truth, there's nothing mysterious about these differences. They reflect straightforward business decisions, shaped by supply, cultural context, and competition. Pork markets in Europe are more stable, allowing McDonald's to source and produce the sandwich on a permanent basis without the same financial ups and downs that make it risky in the US. Consumer habits matter too. In Europe, ribs and pork sandwiches are less tied to regional identity and heated debates about authenticity. A restructured pork patty isn't judged against the sacred traditions of barbecue. It's simply another fast food option in a crowded field. And in some international markets, where local competitors already sell rib sandwiches, McDonald's gives its version permanence to compete on consistency rather than shock value. Social media, however, magnifies the sense of disconnect. Posts from Europe often describe the sandwich casually, as if there's nothing worth mentioning. Yet when those casual mentions reach US audiences, they trigger responses anchored in jealousy and amazement. American fans frame the same product as a rare treasure and sometimes interpret permanent access elsewhere as an injustice. But the logic is strictly operational, not emotional. McDonald's maintains scarcity where it strengthens sales and brand attention, and minimizes scarcity where it doesn't add financial benefit. This is where the global puzzle matters. It shows clearly that the scarcity myth is a regional tool, not a universal policy. An American fan may believe the McRib is defined by its mystery and absence, but to a German consumer it's defined by availability and predictability. It is the same product, handled with different narratives. This duality doesn't undermine the US strategy, it enhances it. International comparisons fuel internet conversation, provide fans with stories to trade, and add another layer to the McRib's mythology. For some, this difference even becomes a point of travel curiosity. Tourists share photos of unwrapping McRibs abroad as if they're documenting proof of an alternate timeline. What seems ordinary to a European diner feels extraordinary to an American. The act of eating one outside the US becomes part of the broader story, kept alive by posts describing the experience as living ahead of the curve. Because the US has invested decades into training customers to see the sandwich as rare, witnessing it in a different context becomes almost like completing a food pilgrimage. Still, the practical explanation never changes. Economics and culture dictate the playbook. Permanent McRibs in Europe exist because stable pork supply chains and local dining preferences make them viable. Limited McRibs in America exist because scarcity amplifies nostalgia, creates urgency, and capitalizes on the volatility of pork markets in ways that permanent presence would not. The marketing impact in one region wouldn't necessarily translate in another. For financially minded viewers, there is also an important takeaway. When international posts circulate showing McRibs available every single day, that doesn't mean American customers are being neglected or singled out. It means McDonald's is tailoring its approach to what works in each context. If you're budgeting around food cravings or considering what promotions may appear in your market, know that supply structures and profit logic guide the schedule far more than social media myths. The sandwich appears or disappears not out of malice, but because economics and consumer behavior justify different strategies across borders. That flexibility is part of McDonald's global strength. Few products in its catalog shift so easily between scarcity and permanence. It is not a one-size-fits-all strategy. It's a product adjusted to market fit. In America, uncertainty turns a restructured pork sandwich into an annual news story. In Germany, certainty makes it reliable enough to order anytime, preventing hype but securing steady sales. Both outcomes serve the same corporate goal, and both reinforce how responsive the company can be to different markets. Taken together, the global McRib puzzle demonstrates that no food item carries only one meaning. Some cultures see the McRib as part of everyday dining. Some see it as an event loaded with nostalgia and memes. Both interpretations are valid because both serve the business model at hand. Fans may compare these experiences and argue about which is better, but the system is based on rational adaptation, not favoritism. And yet, all of this global strategy doesn't answer another question quietly sitting in the background. A sandwich can attract attention with scarcity, or feel ordinary when it is always available. But what is actually inside it when you unwrap the box? That less glamorous detail has its own history, one that has sparked criticism and shaped public perception in ways just as important as its timing or global rollout. The nutrition controversy nobody talks about. Every time the McRib makes a return, it's presented as if it's just a quirky, fun treat, a cheap and temporary novelty rather than something anyone should scrutinize closely. Yet the numbers tell a more sobering story. A single McRib comes in at roughly 520 calories, with about 28 grams of fat, 24 grams of protein, and a sodium load that critics often stress is alarmingly high for one sandwich. Health advocates point out that for a menu item so small, it delivers a concentration of processed meat concerns that rarely enter the hype-driven conversation. The unusual construction of the patty lies at the center of the debate. Unlike a burger pressed from ground beef, the McRib uses restructured pork shoulder, meaning trimmings are ground, mixed with binding agents, and molded into the shape of ribs. The process isn't hidden. McDonald's describes it openly, but critics argue it reinforces how far the sandwich sits from traditional barbecue roots. Instead of a slow-smoked slab of pork, it is a processed, engineered item designed for mass production and visual appeal. This restructured approach links it with a broader category of highly processed meats, which nutrition advocates have tied to health risks ranging from obesity to cardiovascular disease. When ingredient lists are examined, what looks like a simple trio of pork, sauce, and bun becomes more complicated. The pork patty includes binders to keep the rib shape intact. The bun is formulated with additives that extend its shelf life and keep the texture soft. And the barbecue sauce layers in sugar, sodium, and preservatives on top of what's already in the meat. On face value, none of these elements are unusual for fast food, but combined, the nutritional breakdown raises concern. Health writers frequently highlight that one McRib delivers more than half the daily recommended sodium intake for a healthy adult. 2 sandwiches, something fans regularly post about eating in a single visit, can exceed an entire day's worth of sodium before fries or drinks even enter the meal. This reality is what watchdog groups emphasize when they bring the sandwich into larger public health debates. They argue the McRib's limited time framing encourages overconsumption in compressed bursts. A sandwich that might not seem especially harmful on its own can become more significant when fans treat its return like a challenge and buy multiple units at once. Social media often features posts of people stockpiling or joking about eating them back-to-back, which amplifies the dietary hit. From the perspective of nutrition advocates, bursts of high consumption tied to marketing events undermine efforts to promote moderation. The dissonance between how the McRib is presented and how it functions nutritionally has also come under fire. Advertising frames it as barbecue, rustic and indulgent, something closer to comfort food than to manufactured product. But when broken down, it aligns far more with industrial design than with culinary tradition. Critics contend this amounts to a mismatch between image and substance. A product sold as nostalgic comfort is in reality an engineered vehicle for salt, fat, and preservatives. What customers perceive as barbecue in a bun is, in their view, closer to fast food chemistry optimized for cost and consistency. Some controversies have gone beyond nutrition and into sourcing. The Humane Society of the United States filed a complaint years ago highlighting conditions at Smithfield Foods, one of McDonald's pork suppliers at the time. The complaint centered on animal welfare, but it ultimately pressured McDonald's into announcing changes, including commitments to phase out pork from suppliers using gestation crates. While the company framed the change as part of its wider corporate responsibility efforts, the timing demonstrated how criticism around the McRib sourcing could intersect with broader debates about food production practices. Despite these critiques, the public conversation surrounding the sandwich often minimizes its nutritional red flags. Fans rarely line up talking about sodium counts or binding agents. They post memes, film reaction videos, and joke about how unhealthy the McRib must be, only to keep eating it anyway. Irony largely replaces genuine hesitation. By 2025, this ironic consumption has become part of the sandwich's cultural loop. Younger audiences in particular acknowledge its processed oddities, while still embracing it as a punchline, creating content that critiques and celebrates the same product in alternating breaths. For some, indulging despite the warnings even feels like a statement against health-conscious culture. This paradox means the McRib's nutrition story never actually derails its popularity. Knowledge of what's inside exists alongside enthusiasm, even fueling it. People joke about how odd or artificial it seems, but those same qualities become reasons to post and participate. Health concerns turn into background noise, or worse, comic relief. The sandwich occupies a space where the label reads one way and the reaction reads another. Each return becomes not just a dietary choice, but a cultural performance, where awareness and disregard coexist in the same act. For public health advocates, that coexistence is precisely the problem. The McRib serves as an example of how excitement and scarcity can override nutritional awareness. Fans treat it as an event, not as food that fits into broader daily choices. When people eat 2 or 3 in one sitting for the sake of the moment, they short-circuit the idea of moderation. That makes the sandwich a useful case study in how marketing strategies can indirectly shape consumption patterns with real-world health effects. The marketing narrative overshadows the nutritional reality, and the risks persist even as jokes about those risks circulate widely. By the mid-2020s, the tension has become fully normalized. Nutrition experts continue pointing to the sandwich in discussions about processed meats and sodium intake. Watchdog groups highlight its role in shaping consumer habits, yet the fan culture surrounding it shows no sign of slowing. The McRib survives this scrutiny precisely because irony cushions the blow. Everyone knows it's flawed, and everyone participates anyway. The myth outweighs the numbers, even when the numbers are clearly available on McDonald's own nutrition charts. This pattern illustrates how the McRib functions in 2 different registers at once, one as a product with measurable health impacts, another as a symbol that thrives through cultural storytelling. And while nutrition often falls into the background during the hype, it shapes the conversation far more than casual fans might realize. For McDonald's, the strategy works because criticism hasn't diminished demand. For fans, participating in the ritual often matters more than parsing the label. The divide remains, reinforcing how myths and marketing can carry a product stronger than facts alone. At That gap also sets the stage for the next question. If nutrition alone cannot contain the frenzy, then what forces actively keep the McRib alive in cultural memory year after year? The answer lies outside the restaurant itself, in the way digital attention reshapes what counts as food culture. Increasingly, the McRib doesn't live in the box. It lives on the screen, in the posts, clips, and countdowns that spread faster than the sandwich itself. Influencers, TikTok, and the new hype cycle. In 2025, the McRib's relevance is increasingly shaped not by restaurant sales, but by how influencers frame it inside a constantly rolling hype cycle. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram Reels now act as the primary stage for its cultural presence. Food reviewers, comedians, and digital pranksters turn each limited return into an avalanche of content. The result is a loop where attention itself becomes the product, often more important than the sandwich being sold in stores. Creators who focus on reviews use the McRib as a seasonal anchor. Some treat its arrival as a reliable moment for generating clicks, filming exaggerated reactions while rating sauce, bun softness, or the rib shape of the patty. The actual verdict almost never matters. Viewers aren't there for a serious assessment, they're reacting to the performance. The thumbnail face, the dramatic hand gestures, the urgency implied by filming right away. Posting a McRib video early in its run increases the odds of being surfaced by platform algorithms, drawing traffic at the very moment social interest peaks. The sandwich serves as a prop, while the real goal is attention. Alongside those reviewers, many creators focus on stunts and humor. Some buy stacks of McRibs and film themselves cramming home freezers full, joking it's McPrepper stock. Others parody resale culture, staging mock scalping schemes where McRibs are priced like collectible sneakers. Skits of sadness, friends clutching piles of wrappers mourning the sandwich's disappearance, circulate as widely as serious reviews. These videos work because they exaggerate scarcity. While tens of thousands of sandwiches are still being sold in real life, on TikTok it feels like every last McRib is about to vanish forever. Humor doesn't undermine the hype, it inflates it, keeping the scarcity myth alive across millions of feeds. Scarcity also fuels prank-style content. Creators record themselves calling multiple stores to ask employees whether the McRib is back, then cut the answers together into chaotic montages of yes, no, maybe. Others give unsuspecting friends stale McRibs from a freezer stash, pretending they've uncovered a lost relic. Instead of pushing back against the sandwich's unpredictability, these clips lean into it, transforming consumer frustration into comedy. The unpredictability of its release becomes digital performance. Online, scarcity feels sharper, more exaggerated, and far more omnipresent than it ever does across actual drive-through counters. Beyond humor, influencers also drive anticipation through early reports and countdowns. Weeks before corporate ads appear, local creators post that they found it first, sparking surges of chatter in other cities. This creates a crowdsourced radar effect, with comments filling up with people confirming or denying sightings in their areas. Once it's officially available, haul videos take over. Influencers buy stacks, spread sandwiches across tables, and unwrap each box like it's a rare collectible. These clips often focus on tiny details: the gloss of the sauce, the ridges pressed into the pork patty, the roll of steam when a sandwich is cracked open on camera. For viewers, it turns an ordinary meal into an unboxing experience, coded with ritual and importance greater than any single ad campaign could deliver. This system thrives on amplification. In reality, plenty of McRibs circulate during a given promotion, but online, influencers frame it as though every sighting could be the last. That skew creates urgency. Audience members feel they must participate now, not for the sake of flavor, but to be part of the online wave before it crashes. Skipping the McRib isn't missing a meal, it's missing a trending meme. Digital reference replaces culinary experience, and consumers respond to momentum, not appetite. Tools built by the fan community deepen that effect. Sites like the McRib Locator, maintained by enthusiasts since the 2000s, remain active, enabling people to pin which stores are serving the sandwich. In late 2024, demand stretched even further. Jars of McDonald's promotional McRib sauce were spotted for resale online, turning sauce packets into their own micro-collectible economy. These examples show that influencers are only part of the equation. Grassroots participation extends the story beyond creators and injects it into real-world behavior. Crowdsourced locators make limited releases more accessible, while spin-off products prove there's appetite for even small pieces of the sandwich's brand. Both reinforce the notion that the McRib is more event than food. For Gen Z and younger millennials, this aligns with how food culture already operates. Their experience of the McRib isn't grounded in nostalgia for 1981 or even early 2000s runs. Instead, it's a digital ritual. eating a McRib becomes secondary to filming yourself with one, joining the pile of content around it. Posting a clip is the equivalent of ordering the sandwich. It secures you a seat in the communal event. In algorithm culture, presence is consumption, and the McRib fits perfectly into that logic. The irony is that actual taste or nutrition rarely influence these videos. The sandwich is a symbol, and participation signals belonging in the same way memes or trending audios do. Over time, these dynamics build a cycle stronger than any corporate ad plan. Official campaigns may spike local sales for a few weeks, but user-generated clips echo for months. Videos reappear in search results, older pranks resurface when rumors of a comeback circulate, and fans replay freezer-effect jokes long after stores stop serving the item. The real visibility outlasts the product, which is what makes the digital lens so powerful. Scarcity repeats, but the loop online never fully stops. What makes this especially significant is that creators aren't just reflecting interest, they're shaping it. Reviews, pranks, and trackers transform the McRib from a sandwich into a storyline. Influencers, often unintentionally, construct the myth each time they exaggerate its rarity, amplify the joy of spotting one, or dramatize the sadness of it vanishing again. The sandwich is valuable online precisely because it sparks content. Burgers and nuggets don't attract the same performances because they're always available. The McRib's unpredictability fuels an ecosystem of digital theater uniquely suited for attention-driven platforms. This is why the McRib's digital afterlife matters more now than the sandwich itself. Audiences view, share, and laugh long after they've eaten, or even if they never did. The McRib survives by cycling back into conversation repeatedly across platforms. That sustained recognition ensures McDonald's benefits from coverage and speculation, even when supply chains go quiet. Content abundance smooths over product absence, so the cultural cycle continues whether or not corporate chooses to run ads. For practical purposes, fans who want to catch one before it's gone face the same reality influencers amplify: unpredictability. The best strategy isn't waiting for McDonald's corporate announcements, but watching franchise-level social media and the community trackers that have become reliable signposts. Creators are often the first public signal that the sandwich has landed somewhere nearby. An official press release always follows, but in 2025, influencer sightings drive the tide faster than PR. For most audiences, one viral TikTok confirms availability more convincingly than any ad campaign. This interplay between marketing theater, algorithm emphasis, and community involvement keeps the McRib relevant. Influencers reinforce the myth, fans organize the search, and resale curiosities spill into secondary markets, shaping hype that often exceeds the food itself. These forces explain why the sandwich remains so resilient. But for all the jokes, countdowns, and memes, one question remains unresolved. How much of this cycle is orchestrated, and how much does McDonald's encourage from behind the curtain? Pressure from influencers is one story, but inside the company, strategy documents and leaks suggest other motivations are just as decisive. Inside the corporate strategy leaks. What happens when internal reporting suggests a fast food item is treated less like dinner and more like strategy? Industry coverage and accounts from former employees indicate that, within McDonald's, the McRib has not always been categorized as a simple menu addition. Instead, it has often been described as a strategic event, a phrase that reframes it as a tool deployed at key times rather than a product that exists on equal footing with fries or a McChicken. This interpretation shifts the context entirely. The McRib stops being a quirky promotional oddity and begins to look like a corporate lever, something drawn out when conditions warrant it, then withdrawn once the mission is met. Reports suggest that the conversations about the McRib typically sit higher up the chain than those for ordinary products. Franchise operators may get advance notice about Shamrock Shakes or McFlurries, which have predictable seasonal windows. The McRib, by contrast, is often decided in settings where only senior executives and a handful of planning staff are involved. By the time the information filters down to regional offices, the timing and supply arrangements are already locked. For managers running stores, the arrival feels sudden, more like a directive than an open-ended option. That difference alone frames the sandwich as something more deliberate than seasonal whim. Former employees and analysts commenting on these patterns noted that the McRib tends to be discussed less as nostalgia and more as a way to create measurable change in short order. If traffic dips, if a quarter fails to hit forecasts, or if a headline product line underperforms, the McRib's return can generate a spike. Seen in this light, it is not tied to traditional holidays or cultural themes in the way pumpkin spice lattes or shamrock-flavored shakes are. Instead, it becomes tethered to internal performance markers. When business conditions call for attention and urgency, the McRib can be switched on. The way the McRib is withheld also strengthens this effect. Industry sources describe limited runs capped at levels that may not match consumer demand. In practice, this can mean pulling the promotion even as lines are still forming. From outside, that produces frustration when fans can't find the sandwich. From inside, however, the capped release creates a concentrated bump in traffic rather than a prolonged, flattening plateau. The result is an efficient surge stored neatly inside the accounting sheets, one that disappears before its novelty fades. Viewed through a business lens, it is easier to read the McRib not as a meal but as a trigger, active for a short burst, then shut down before it normalizes. That interpretation is supported by public-facing framing as well. McDonald's executives have repeatedly described the McRib in press statements as a product that drives excitement and creates seasonal traffic. Language like this might sound promotional, but it mirrors the insider phrasing that paints the sandwich as an event. It is positioned as a spike maker, not a staple. The distinction matters, because if it lived on the permanent menu, it would lose its ability to deliver those short bursts on demand. The side effect of this secrecy is that employees on the ground often experience the same uncertainty as customers. Operators speculate, compare schedules, and try to guess based on shipment orders. Some describe guessing games around sauce deliveries or carton labeling as if they were decoding signals. In doing so, they imitate the very speculation fans perform online. This lack of clarity inside the company mirrors the mystique outside it, reinforcing the perception that the McRib is unpredictable even when the decision comes from targeted calculations. For fans, not knowing when it will reappear has become its own tradition. For employees, hearing nothing until the rollout is finalized can feel like operating in the dark. But for McDonald's as a corporation, that opacity helps preserve control. When only a few hold the decision-making power, the sandwich can be aligned with financial rhythms in ways that external chatter cannot predict. Industry reporting presents this not as a covert conspiracy, but as corporate pragmatism, a product treated as a flexible asset, wielded carefully, and framed publicly as crowd-pleasing nostalgia. Frustration over this pattern helps explain why demands for a permanent McRib are rarely entertained. A permanent sandwich cannot serve as a special lever. It would be folded into ordinary sales data, subject to the highs and lows of daily fast food ordering. More importantly, its cultural aura of scarcity would vanish. To executives, that limitation outweighs the benefits of making fans happy year-round. It is more useful to hold the McRib back precisely because its absence transforms it into a powerful button to press when needed. Commentators often note the sandwich's unusual duality. To the public, it seems chaotic, sometimes appearing in October, other times in November, and occasionally not at all. That inconsistency heightens its mystique and fuels jokes about corporate gamesmanship. Yet from the perspective framed by industry sources, there is a reliable pattern behind the apparent chaos. That reliability lies not in calendar dates but in conditions, supply costs, traffic needs, fiscal timing. The McRib's prestige grows stronger when it seems erratic, but corporate strategy views it as predictably effective. Both sides are correct depending on perspective. When you interpret the sandwich as an event rather than an entree, the irregular schedule, sudden shortages, and abrupt cutoffs begin to make more sense. Artificial scarcity is not just a marketing trick, but a structural necessity in keeping the McRib viable as a corporate tool. This scarcity strengthens its financial role and sustains its cultural legend at the same time. It is not accidental that secrecy and unpredictability are baked into the rollout strategy. They are part of what makes the sandwich continue to serve its two audiences: the consumer who craves the thrill and the executive who monitors the numbers. This framing doesn't erase questions, though. If the McRib is calculated as a kind of lever, then it is no longer just about nostalgia or barbecue. It becomes an example of deliberate scarcity being used as a corporate asset. And that leads to a larger issue that extends well beyond one sandwich: whether the practice of designing scarcity into a product still carries the same punch in 2025 that it once did. Does artificial scarcity still work in 2025? In 2025, the core issue isn't whether people line up for the McRib when it reappears. They still do. But whether artificial scarcity can continue to deliver results in a world shaped by constant transparency. Digital tools make hidden strategies harder to maintain. Fans track sightings of the sandwich across regions. Analysts highlight pork price dips as clues, and availability maps circulate within hours of each launch. What once looked like mystery has become an information stream anyone can follow. The question is how well the tactic holds in an environment where people understand the trick even as they keep playing along. The scarcity playbook originally worked because people didn't know when or where the McRib would surface. That gap in knowledge created urgency, making each release feel fleeting. But today, fans themselves supply the missing data. Websites like the McRib locator crowdsource sightings, while social media groups distribute store-level confirmations like breaking news reports. Analysts and trackers even correlate reappearances with commodity cycles, noting that McRib launches often align with falling pork prices. Some writers openly predict timing based on those signals, making the surprise element harder to maintain. Once fans see scarcity explained through spreadsheets or price graphs, it no longer feels magical, it feels managed. That recognition shapes how scarcity is received. Younger audiences in particular are fluent in spotting hype tactics and naming them out loud. Scroll through TikTok reactions, and you'll see comments calling the McRib cycle a corporate stunt. Screenshots of pork futures graphs often appear side by side with footage of someone unwrapping the sandwich, both presented in the same ironic tone. The effect is that scarcity sparks participation through humor and critique, not through uncritical excitement. People join in precisely because they know it's contrived, but awareness shifts the mood. Instead of mystery, the release becomes performance, one they feel both in on and slightly resistant to. McDonald's faces a delicate balance here. Lean too far into transparency, and the entire illusion evaporates. No one queues at drive-thrus because pork contracts were favorable that month, but lean too hard into secrecy, and the frustration grows more visible. Fans complain in comment sections, posting lines like "stop playing games" or "make it permanent already." This sort of backlash spreads faster today than in earlier decades because negative feedback on platforms multiplies quickly, attaching irritation to the very promotions meant to spark joy. In a culture that expects honesty from brands, opacity cuts differently than it once did. Even with skepticism, however, the short-term payoff is still clear. Every launch generates spikes in sales, news coverage, and viral content. Memes, video reviews, and parody skits all extend the lifespan of the promotion. Scarcity guarantees conversation, and conversation translates into traffic. Critics may roll their eyes as they wait in line, but they still buy, often to confirm their dislike or to show content documenting the experience. What matters is participation, and scarcity still coaxes it reliably. For short bursts, the tactic continues to work. Limits show up in the long run. Sustaining mystique requires ongoing novelty, but digital communication speeds up exposure. A cycle that once stretched for weeks now compresses into days. Videos leak availability before ads roll out, and by the time television spots air, the story has already moved through multiple online phases, citing meme critique. The reduced lifespan weakens the long arc of anticipation. Scarcity still inspires reactions, but they reach exhaustion more quickly. Instead of dominance for weeks, the McRib gets eclipsed by unrelated viral events after only days. The play still functions, but with tighter margins of cultural relevance. Generational change makes the tension sharper. Gen Z, raised in an atmosphere of constant advertising and drop culture, recognizes scarcity strategies instantly. They treat them as part of internet language rather than surprises. This doesn't stop them from engaging, it often encourages it, but engagement comes with commentary attached. Unlike earlier generations who took the spectacle at face value, younger fans join the cycle half critically and half playfully. They interact on two levels at once, reposting unboxings while mocking the manipulative framing. Scarcity works differently when audiences dissect it in real time. It generates visibility, but it also carries traces of distrust. This creates a bigger challenge for brands. Scarcity without trust risks backfiring. If participation tips into cynicism, the very mechanism that once delivered excitement can begin to feel stale. Each new release would no longer feel like a playful surprise, but like rerun theater, obvious and uninspired. McDonald's has historically maneuvered by leaning into the contradiction, letting fans critique while still buying, but there's no guarantee that this balance holds forever. If the irony outweighs enthusiasm, scarcity could lose its edge. Scarcity also interacts uneasily with the modern attention economy. Viral food items thrive when content cycles are aligned with availability, but the McRib now re-enters a digital space where topics rise and fall daily. That fragmented environment weakens the slow-build mystique. In earlier decades, a scarcity product could carry the cultural spotlight across weeks. In 2025, a new meme or celebrity event can replace it within days. This recalibration means the McRib may generate traffic spikes, but they are shorter, sharper, and harder to extend. Artificial scarcity still buys attention, but the window for cashing in is smaller. The short-term math remains favorable. A limited-time drop still brings a wave of customers through doors. Many order fries or drinks alongside, boosting revenue. The sandwich doesn't need to dominate an entire year to be valuable. Scarcity produces urgency, and urgency produces sales surges. But viewed over a longer timeline, the cracks show. Transparency undermines the illusion that scarcity is natural, while social acceleration compresses the cultural life of each run. The tactic has resilience, but not permanence. For customers, especially those focused on budgets, artificial scarcity has a clearer meaning. McRib run is best treated as a promotional spike, not as a reliable value play. If someone enjoys the flavor, there's nothing wrong with indulging once for the ritual. But from a financial standpoint, the sandwich is not the best use of limited fast food spending. Core menu items, anchored by year-round value promotions, offer steadier returns for price-conscious eaters. Scarcity creates urgency, but it doesn't necessarily create lasting value. Awareness of this difference helps viewers prioritize. Join the spectacle if curiosity calls, but keep your regular spending grounded in consistent value options. So in 2025, does artificial scarcity still work? Yes, in short bursts, it delivers visibility, traffic, and attention. But the growing transparency of fan trackers, the speed of digital cycles, and the sharper eye of younger audiences all weaken its long-term potency. Scarcity still generates headlines, but each wave feels thinner and more contested than the last. The McRib holds on because it has decades of history behind it, and because irony itself sustains engagement. Yet observers can already see the limits approaching. The bigger issue may not be whether the trick will end, but how soon audiences decide that the spectacle no longer feels worth chasing. And at that point, what remains is less about taste and more about what has always defined the sandwich, the story woven around it. The McRib endures not because of flavor, but because scarcity and spectacle make it feel bigger than what it is. A restructured pork patty becomes cultural theater when absence, secrecy, and hype work together. It's clever, sometimes cynical, and always tied as much to economics as nostalgia. For consumers, the practical takeaway is simple. Don't let limited-time marketing push you into overspending. Treat the McRib and any LTO as entertainment, not value. Knowing the role of supply, strategy, and social media helps you decide whether to join the chase or save the money. Would you? Let us know in the comments.